We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Pickett. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson with some breaking news. Well, the news is that Deebo Samuel wants to get traded from the San Francisco 49ers. So it's great. News breaks right before we go live here on YouTube.
Yeah, we already knew that though, right?
That he really wanted to get traded though.
Yeah.
Oh wait, you already deduced that from his Instagram deletions?
Also, there was posts from his brother or something saying that he wasn't going to be a 40. It was out there.
I missed that. But this was we're talking about it as breaking news right now.
Okay.
So let's talk Deebo Samuel and some potential trade destinations. A couple other housekeeping items. We did already pre-record our player comp show with Nate Tice. It was a great show. It was long.
It was fun.
Kept the poor guy for almost 2 hours.
I mean, look, he knew what he was getting into. He's seen the show before.
Yeah, I think he knew what he was getting into, but we had a lot of fun, and that's going to drop tomorrow in the usual time slot, so 10:30 a.m. here on YouTube. We could probably get the audio up right around that same time as well. But yeah, we had a lot of fun going through player comps. Went back to the 90s for some,
even further.
We went into the 50s or 60s or whatever. Yes, we went way back for some comps there, so we had a lot of fun with that. That'll be coming out. So check it out.
Mm-hmm.
You got a charity update? Did you hit your goal yet?
No. I'm up to 2,100. I'm pretty close to just calling it so we can move on to baseball.
Or are you just going to call it?
I mean, unless someone comes in and
steal
gives me $400
$400 from the kids.
Unless somebody comes in and throws $400 on this thing so we can get to the goal of 2,500, I'm out. It's not happening. We're stalled.
It's still a good donation. We appreciate everybody for donating to Sam's charity or to my charity in our pinned tweets. Both trying to get to 2,500. You're a little closer than I am. I'm creeping up toward 1,000.
I mean, yours really is the jackpot. You've raised money and you're not going to have to do anything.
Yeah.
And God knows you did nothing in terms of preparing the graphical package.
Hope is here.
Wasn't a lot of effort that went into yours generally.
There was a lot of effort that went in. Those are my friends over at Heritage House. We're taking care of those guys.
Yeah.
So appreciate everybody that's already donated. Get to mine or Sam's and keep going. One of us will get to 2,500. But if you want to call it, we'll see. We'll talk about it next week.
We may have to. We've hit a plateau. We haven't gone up for a while.
Do you have anything else before we get into this whole thing?
No. Let's go.
All right. Well, the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance investment and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day or on draft night. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, let's get into these Deebo Samuel rumors. Elite wide receiver / running back from the San Francisco 49ers. He wants out, Sam.
Yes.
Why does he want out? He's 3 years into his career. He's heading into year 4 of his rookie contract. He's just unhappy that he didn't get paid yet? What's the deal?
Yeah, I would assume so. It's always money, right? I mean, he wants the new contract. He wants a giant sum of money. And I would imagine, pure speculation on my part, but my assumption is when they came to the table and they're like, all right, let's start talking next contract, whatever the opening of that negotiation was was very far apart from where he wanted to be. He was like, oh, well, okay, if that's how I'm valued here, I'm out. I'm going to go somewhere else where they do value me.
Where do you think that range was? Because we did a daily on this a few weeks back, and this is as we're talking average per year has gone up drastically among the top wide receivers in the NFL right now. This is why there's A.J. Brown. Did A.J. Brown do the Instagram deletion too?
He deleted Tennessee from something. I don't remember what. I just remember reading that Tennessee is no longer a part of a profile of his somewhere.
Yeah, we've been sitting here joking about, Instagram
like
profile manipulation and all that stuff. It's real.
So
It is real.
You've got Deebo, you've got A.J. Brown, and then Terry McLaurin is the other one due a deal at some point. He, as far as I'm aware, has had no deletion on Instagram of any description. So he's got some fresh Commanders gear. Yeah, he's just quietly trying to get a contract out there, not deleting things.
Yeah. So here's the average per year for the top receiver contracts. Tyreek Hill is at 30. Devonte Adams is at 28. Both of those happened this offseason after both guys got traded. DeAndre Hopkins is at 27.25. The Hopkins deal, coming into this year, Hopkins was $5 or $6 million above anyone else. So now two people are ahead of Hopkins. Nuke is sitting there at 27.25. Stephon Diggs signed a modest $24 million per year contract this offseason as well. So that would have been the highest non-DeAndre Hopkins contract, right? So those top four are really in a different world. Then you get into DJ Moore of the Panthers, a little over 20. Keenan Allen right at 20. Mike Williams at 20. Amari Cooper at 20. Chris Godwin at 20. So there's a group at 20 who are really good receivers. And then the top four, you would say, are absolutely elite receivers, making anywhere between 24 and 30 million per year. And Deebo Samuel's probably looking at this saying, I want to be in that 24 plus range. And you and I talked about it like, we would probably be closer to the 20 range for Deebo Samuel. Is that fair in assessing this wide receiver market and where Deebo fits in here? By the way, A.J. Brown should probably be in that top tier very soon as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair. But the point being, like, what does his camp think about that?
Sure,
and
of course.
The thing with Deebo, he's in this weird spot where if you're Deebo Samuel specifically, or if you're Deebo Samuel's agent / advisors, if you're in his circle, the circle of trust,
of course.
If you're there, you can legitimately credibly believe that you deserve to be paid as one of the league's primary playmakers, like one of the best paid non-quarterbacks in the NFL. Because if you look at what he did last year, the numbers are insane. The performance was crazy. He was used in this not quite unique role because, Cordero Patterson had a bit of that as well, but this hybrid situation where he's taking legitimate running back carries. So he racks up, just the regular season, 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns, just receiving. And then you add in what he did as a rushing threat, and it adds another almost 400 yards and 8 touchdowns to his tally. Like, that puts him up there with anybody. So Deebo's out here going, well, who else can match these numbers? If this guy's getting $30 million a year and this guy's getting, that level, that's where I need to be. But the 49ers are looking at this and saying, okay, but how much of this was, tin cup over here? Kyle Shanahan creating this, like, amazing round of golf out of the shovel and the rake and whatever. Like, I can make magic happen out of these garden tools. The fact that you were the beneficiary of this doesn't mean I should then up the value of what I'm paying you. So
it's a tough one, right? Because
look, it's a binary world we live in, right? It's either all or nothing. It's like either Kyle Shanahan creates magic out of nothing, or Deebo Samuel's the greatest player in the NFL. There's nothing in the middle. I'm not saying that Deebo Samuel is 100% a product of Kyle Shanahan. We saw at the Senior Bowl that dude was uncoverable. We saw in college that the guy was amazing. He will be a great wide receiver wherever he goes. But the question is, that extra 400 yards and the 8 touchdowns and the unique threat that he brings to the 49ers as this hybrid weapon, this guy that can line up in the backfield, this guy that can break defenses from a personnel standpoint, how much of that is Kyle Shanahan and how much of that is applicable in any other offense in the NFL? I think a pretty large portion of it is Shanahan. Essentially, his value is highest to the 49ers, who are probably acutely aware of that and therefore don't want to pay him what he wants to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there in the middle as well. I mean, we've said many times on this show, the fact that you don't find the skill set of a receiver who can line up out wide, run a really nice dig route, run a vertical route tree, and literally on the next play line up as a running back and look like a good running back. Pick up 5, pick up 6, read blocks, make one cut, and then finish with power. I mean, so legitimately 2 different skill sets. And that's new, by the way, right? I mean, so that just happened this year. Because my description after the 2019 season was you can't find a guy like Deebo Samuel that often that can run the receiving tree and then also be really effective on jet sweeps the way he was, because that's how they initially used him, right, in the jet game. And he had 19 carries. He had over 13 yards per carry as a rookie on 19 carries, right? He was a gimmick weapon. And then this year he carries the ball 86 times for over 500 yards, including the playoffs, and 9 touchdowns. So they expanded his role this year coming off of the injury. So, yeah, on one hand, it's like, yeah, Shanahan has a history of put somebody back in the backfield, hand the ball to him. He's going to average 4.5 per pop and look great, right? On the other hand, Deebo is a very unique player, right? He was averaging almost 6 per carry. He's a receiver doing this. We talked about how that breaks defenses. But my question is, has that artificially inflated his value? So the fact that he was a very good running back last year, has that made Deebo feel more valuable than he is and feel like he's in that $28 to $30 million a year range, when the reality is he's probably in the $20 million range unless he goes to a team that truly does use him in that hybrid role?
No, but I think it's like running backs, right? It's like the fact that you were able to do what you did is amazing, and the fact that you take a beating and all these kinds of things, it's a really difficult job, but it's obviously and backed up by evidence, like you are generally not the driving force behind this, right? A running back is less of a driving force behind the rushing success than the blocking. Like that's essentially been proven out. So you want to give credit to the running back when he has a great season, and the James Conner thing with Arizona, right? James Conner comes in, great season for Arizona. It's like you want to reward that. The guy did a great job for not much money. The natural inclination is, well, let's reward him for that. He deserves it. But you're sort of sending the resources to the wrong place, or you're rewarding the wrong thing. So, again, it's different levels. It's different percentages of play here, because I think Deebo's a bigger part of this than running back versus blocking. But it's the same idea. Like Deebo and Kyle Shanahan's offense with San Francisco is this amazing match made in heaven. But that doesn't necessarily mean that because the sum of the parts is greater in San Francisco, that San Francisco should therefore pay him more money. Because automatically it means that like there's something in it for Deebo as well to stay there, right? Like you will not be as successful anywhere else as you are right here. So why would we pay you more money to do that? Because that's in your interest as well.
Do you think Deebo is upset with his usage pattern? Do you think he doesn't want to play running back?
No, I doubt it.
Is he just trying to strike while the iron's hot and saying, my value's, we'll just say my value is as high as it's going to be?
It's all those guys that year, they're due contracts now. This is how the world works. So all those guys are looking for their big deal, the second contract. That's the big one, right? This is the big contract that everybody in the NFL is looking for. You excel, you do well on a rookie deal, and you get a monster payday for your second contract. And that's the one that sets you up with generational wealth, right? Not only are you set, but your kids are set, their kids are set, you're done, right? You made it. That's the jackpot. So this is the one that everybody wants to get right and maximize the amount of money they're getting paid. So I'm not criticizing Deebo at all. That guy wants to maximize the amount of money he's getting paid, and he's coming off the perfect year to do that, right? He was legitimately an offensive player of the year candidate last year, and therefore has every right to expect that he should be getting paid as well as anybody in the NFL. The problem being that the other side is almost certainly looking at this and saying, yeah, but like what percentage of that production is us? You know, what percentage of that production is manufactured by this offense, and therefore what percentage of Deebo can we create with somebody else?
Yeah.
Like if we take Brandon Ayuk next year and make him Deebo, what does that look like? Or if we draft somebody and we make him Deebo, what does that look like?
So I think the question's different, though. To me, the question is, because I don't think everybody can do what Deebo did.
Of course not. But, like, again, it's Kyle Shanahan has this history of taking weird athletes and using them in unconventional ways and turning them into superstars. So maybe they don't take, like, Ayuk and ask him to do exactly what Deebo did. But can we create an offense around Ayuk? Or can we pivot back to creating the offense around George Kittle? Can we draft somebody and create the offense around that guy? My point being, if you're Shanahan, you're like, this thing doesn't have to revolve around Deebo. It just did last year. Like, what happens if we say, bye-bye, somebody else can pay him, we'll take a first-round pick or whatever it is, and we build an offense around one of these other special athletes we have?
Trey Lance.
I mean, look.
Trey Lance is probably taking Deebo's carries, to be honest, next year.
This is what San Francisco has to be asking themselves and probably saying to Deebo's camp, which is probably why they're not on the same page here.
We generally look at all of these things from a team standpoint, right? I've heard players complain in the past that, like, fans always side with the team rather than the player. Why don't you want players to get paid? And it's like, well, because fans are rooting for their team. And they're trying to, get in the head of their team and make good team building decisions. So from a team perspective here, it is interesting that you made this incredible draft pick. You got essentially 2 years of great play out of Deebo Samuel, an injury season 2, and he's a special player, and now he wants out. And I'm sure that's uncomfortable for the Niners because you'd rather have Deebo Samuel. At the same time, I try to take that 50,000-foot view sometimes, or 30,000-foot view, whatever it might be.
50 is very high.
50 is very high. You might not be able to see it. Let's just stay at 30.
Cruising altitude is what, like 33,000 feet or something?
Let's say 30,000-foot view. Let's do that. And I look at awesome second-round pick, few years of excellent play on the cheap, and now if you can flip Deebo, he's upset, but if you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff back for Deebo Samuel, if you're going to get a whole bunch of draft picks back, the money that you would have paid him can be dispersed everywhere elsewhere along the roster. The draft picks that you gave up to go get Trey Lance, you're going to, maybe get some of that back. It's not a bad place to be in with the 49ers, except it's uncomfortable because, man, it's so much more fun putting an offense out there with Deebo and Ayuk and George Kittle, and now with Trey Lance and the way that he puts defenses in a bind.
Yeah, I mean,
I just want to say, from a player perspective, I get it. I mean, the players are taking things into their own hands over the last couple of years and pushing the envelope as far as trying to get paid, guaranteed money, the timing of when they get paid, and I'd say good for them. Go get paid when you have an opportunity to do that.
I don't think that Deebo's value is highest in San Francisco. So he's not going to be better anywhere else than he is in this offense. And I think the 49ers are the best team to maximize Deebo's unique talents. Like, the best place from both perspectives is for Deebo to stay in San Francisco. The problem is, in order to do that, Deebo probably has to understand that, hey, look, for you to be your best self, you need to accept that this is the best place for you to be, and therefore you're going to have to take a little bit less money. Now, if he doesn't want to do that, if he just wants to say, look, I'm only in it for this contract, I will be 85, 90% of myself production-wise to go play for the Jets. Or, because they're going to pay me $5 million more a year. Fine, I don't know. I can't criticize that. It's a man's decision. But to me, the best marriage here is for Deebo and the 49ers to stay together for the kids.
Stay together.
Shout
out to Blank.
If they do divorce, then, look, the 49ers are going to try and get whatever they can in trade, and Deebo is just going to go where the money takes him. And that could be the Jets, maybe Green Bay.
I want to get into that. I want to get into the best fits for Deebo, who would absolutely be a quality pickup. But the only true guaranteed quality pickup this season is Manscaped, Sam. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming. With Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, your skill position, like Deebo, will be sleek and smooth enough for a sub-4.340. Support us and head to manscaped.com. Use the exclusive code PFF at checkout, and you get 20% off plus free shipping. Because of their ceramic blade and skin-safe technology, your nicks and snags will be reduced. And in the season of trimming the roster, Manscaped will make sure you're cutting the right players and not any important pieces to your D. Look, fellas, don't fall off for a draft board. The ladies out there think long nose hair is a major turnoff. I did not know that. The Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer is your solution why not use the best tools for the job there as well? April is draft season, but it is also Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. Manscaped has partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer, men's health, and early cancer detection. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. It's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code PFF to turn your Mr. Irrelevant into a first-round pick using our friends over at Manscaped. So best fits for Deebo Samuel. You are of the mind that the 49ers are the best fit for Deebo Samuel. Is that right?
Yes. The 49ers are the best fit for Deebo Samuel. If he's moving, then you start looking at the teams that have
So everybody's talking Jets.
Yeah.
Because you have Mike LaFleur there.
Yeah.
Same system. And everybody's talking Dolphins, even though they've already made a massive investment in Tyreek Hill. But Dolphins have Mike McDaniel.
The Dolphins, the Dolphins are not a fit to me.
Why not?
Too
many playmakers?
I don't think they can cram Tyreek. I don't know that they can craft an offense that contains both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You want to add Deebo to that and say, what does that look like? Not a chance in hell.
Probably not.
No way.
So the Packers
I think,
be in play here.
Look, the Jets make sense because, A, there's a LaFleur connection, and B, they have a need a wide receiver.
Yes.
The Packers make sense because they have 2 first-round picks and a need a wide receiver, a desperate one, in fact. And, by the way, we're willing to pay Devonte Adams the monster contract to keep him there. Now, they weren't willing to do that until essentially it was too late. So let's give them partial credit for that. But the point is, like, they're willing to give some money out to a wide receiver. So remember, you have to factor in not just you're trading for this dude, but you're going to have to give him the contract that he wants. Otherwise, you're in the same situation San Francisco was, only you just traded for him. So the Packers, I think, make some sense because, A, they have the picks to do it, and B, they had the willingness to dedicate that kind of money to a receiver, and he's younger. Kansas City, no. They have the picks. They need wide receivers, but they don't want to give up that contract. So I don't really see that one happening.
Yeah, so I think as far as the Jets go and the Packers, I think you hit on it, like willingness, right? The Jets were in on Tyreek Hill, probably would have paid him, and you've got the fit for Deebo there. Man, so that would be Deebo Samuel, Elijah Moore, unless there's players traded. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis over there with the Jets, the couple tight ends that they got in free agency. If it's the Packers, they wanted to pay Devonte Adams. There's risk in Devonte Adams being a little bit older. Deebo's only 26 years old, so I'm sure the Packers would be more comfortable paying him that money. I guess my question there is you're probably not using him. You're certainly not using him the same way the Niners are, right? You've got running backs, you have a system in place, you have a year or two more of Aaron Rodgers. Is Deebo Samuel actually a good fit for Aaron Rodgers? I mean, look, Deebo Samuel can succeed everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. I think the question is he worth $25 to $30 million everywhere?
No, to me. But
that's the issue. Like, I don't know if he's worth $25 to $30 million in Green Bay. Is he worth 18, 20 million? Maybe. But the 25 to 30 million, is he going to be that 150 target guy and Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy? I don't know if that's the case.
They're almost two different questions because the thing is he's going to get, in order to get him, a team is going to have to pay him that because presumably that's the source of this entire thing. So whatever team trades for him is giving him that kind of contract. Then they need to figure out if they can create that kind of value with him in a more conventional offense that doesn't have Kyle Shanahan making weird things happen. So does he have the same value in Green Bay as San Francisco? No. I've already said that. I think his best value is in San Francisco. But Green Bay would have to pay him that to get him there. So it doesn't matter. It's a moot point. That's how much it's going to cost to get Deebo, and you're probably going to be overpaying him to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm just looking at cap space for next starting in 2023. You have teams like the Bears have a ridiculous amount of cap space. I'm sure that's not the most attractive spot for Deebo Samuel, unless he just cares about getting paid. Bears, Falcons, Giants, Cardinals.
Sneaky team that might make a move like this, New Orleans. Need a wide receiver, just maneuvered themselves to get 2 first-round picks. If that maneuver was to get a wide receiver and a tackle as opposed to positioning themselves to jump up higher in the draft and go after a quarterback or whatever, like if they're planning on using both those first-round picks, one of them for Deebo or one of them as part of a trade for Deebo, and then give him a giant contract. The Saints are the kind of team that will just pay that and figure it out later,
So I'm looking at our friends over at Over the Cap, sorted by cap space for 2023 of every every time this is listed up until the first day of the league year. The Saints are always last.
Yeah.
Right now, $42 million over next year's cap, by far last in the league, but they always figure it out.
They were like $120 million this time a year ago.
This is
this is easy street.
So yeah, the Saints are an interesting one. I think there's already people in the YouTube channel. I mean, this is how you have to view this, right? If you're the Jets picking at 4 and 10, and you're going to draft a Garrett Wilson or a Drake London or whoever you're going to draft potentially, or if you're the Saints going to draft a receiver, or you're the whoever, Eagles, whatever team it might be, it's not just Deebo Samuel versus that receiver, of course. It's a first contract receiver versus Deebo Samuel about to make presumably $25 million per year plus. And is Deebo Samuel worth that plus the opportunity cost of that whatever other picks you have to give up?
Yeah, I mean, we keep talking about the Vikings and going from Stephon Diggs to Justin Jefferson and how they basically nailed that about as well as you can. And if you look at their production since that point, those two receivers have been really close, almost identical. But it's cost like $30 million less to have one than the other. And Stephon Diggs was on a cheap deal. Like he was on nothing like a market-leading type of deal. So effectively, in really reductive, simple terms, you can boil that deal down to the Vikings or Buffalo paid $30 million for the certainty. They paid $30 million for the guarantee of getting that kind of production. Or the Vikings were willing to save $30 million for the gamble that you could replace what they gave up. So if you're a team like the Jets or any of these other teams that are thinking about using a first-round pick on a wide receiver, that's the cost, right? It's you are going to pay Deebo $25-30 million a year, a monster sum of money for the certainty that you're getting Deebo as opposed to rolling the dice on a wide receiver in the first round. The Jets with two high first-round picks, that trade would, I think, be a lot more creative, to be more involved, obviously. I think Deebo's value, quote-unquote, is like a low first-round pick at maximum. So you're talking the Green Bays, the Kansas Cities of the world might be able to trade one of those picks straight up for Deebo. Anybody else, there's going to be other stuff involved.
Green Bay and Kansas City they're the interesting discussion, right? Because I don't want to say the Packers just made the decision. They did want to pay Devonte Adams, but they had to trade him. The Chiefs just made the decision, we're not going to pay Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
And we're going to get the 5 draft picks in return. But does a 26-year-old Deebo Samuel change that a little bit? He's not the same player as Tyreek Hill, but a yak player in a yak offense, right? I mean, that is yards after the catch is a huge part of the Chiefs' game. I feel like they're creative enough to use them. I feel like the Packers maybe aren't, right? They would just say, go play wide receiver and you'll be a good receiver. So I think the Chiefs are interesting here, but I don't know if it's did they trade Tyreek Hill and not pay him because it's Tyreek Hill and it's his age and they knew his value was 5 draft picks, or are they more willing to do it for a few million less and a younger player? You know what I'm saying?
It might not be a few million less, though.
It might not be.
Another team that would be the Lions. So the Lions are another one of those teams with a low first-round pick, and they have wide receiver need, and they're in the midst of rebuilding, and Deebo could theoretically be a keystone piece of this rebuild.
How about the Colts? They don't have a first-round pick. I was looking at Washington. They don't really have crazy draft capital or anything like that, but because my strategy is they need
But they're going to have to pay
playmakers.
McLaurin, so they're not going to.
Yeah, you can't pay McLaurin. I mean, look, you probably can't pay McLaurin and Deebo Samuel.
No.
The Chargers have it great, right? I mean, you've got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both right at $20 million. Is that that might be the sweet spot of? Because think about the difference between 20 and 28 million, right? $8 million gets you another player, right? You're paying a guy 20 versus 28. It gets you another decent player. So, any other locations you think that might make sense?
No, I think we've kind of covered all of them. But then the question becomes, what does this do for A.J. Brown, for Terry McLaurin? Like A.J. Brown, apparently, was deleting Tennessee from whatever the hell it was. I mean, he's obviously agitating for the new contract.
Yeah.
McLaurin doesn't appear to be agitating for the new contract, but obviously wants a new contract as well. should either of those guys be on the block the way Deebo potentially is, or at least wants to be?
So both of those guys are more traditional receivers, and I think you're going to make – I don't want to take away from Deebo because I love him so much, but A.J. Brown feels like the cleanest of those guys, right? You're going to plug A.J. Brown into any offense, and they're going to get so much better.
I don't know. So he might be the cleanest of them in terms of overall skill set, but he's also got a much more extensive injury history.
That's true.
Than McLaurin does.
You do have the injury history there.
Who, let's face it, McLaurin's pretty much a clean, complete superstar wide receiver without the injury history.
And he hasn't had the quarterback to get him the ball and everything.
Right.
But here's the thing with A.J. Brown, though, because we've talked about number one wide receivers as force multipliers and all that stuff. And if you look at Julio Jones' history and Matt Ryan with his on-off splits with Julio, whatever. If you want to pair Tannehill's career resurgence with Derrick Henry, you can make that argument, But you could also make it with A.J. Brown. That's the other X factor in Ryan Tannehill going from slightly above average quarterback to one of the more efficient throw-for-throw quarterbacks in the NFL over these last 3 years. I think A.J. Brown has that kind of effect. So, yeah, and I think he does that everywhere, right? So, should they be on the block? I mean, I guess it depends on if the Titans want to pay 30. It depends on if the Commanders want to pay almost 30, because it's got to be up in that range.
The bottom line with all this is that New Hopkins deal is still screwing up wide receiver negotiations. Like, there have been contracts now get to there, but it's still causing problems. Like, you're either willing to take what the team believes is the market value and do the Stephon Diggs type of deal, or you need to find the team that's willing to make that jump and essentially exceed where the market should have taken it, because those are the contracts that are like falling in line with the DeAndre Hopkins deal, which was out of whack with where the rest of wide receiver contracts are. So to me, all three teams should pay those three respective wide receivers. Now, the 49ers, I don't think, should go as far as Deebo appears to want to go, i.e., they should not make Deebo a $28, $30 million a year receiver. I just don't think he's worth that for them or anybody else. So if that's what it takes to keep Deebo, I think they're going to have to trade him. The Titans and the Commanders, I think, arguably should go that high. Like, their wide receivers they're both elite. They're both like complete skill set guys. They're both dominant out on the outside. Like, what's the point in drafting those guys if you're not going to keep them? Like, at some point, you're going to have to factor in that if he's as good as you think he is, you're going to need to pay him market-leading money. The problem is that the market, it's market-leading plus the Hopkins inflation.
All right, so I'm with you there, man. I think the Titans have to do what they can around Ryan Tannehill, and the Commanders absolutely have to do what they can around Carson Wentz, whereas the 49ers are in this intriguing spot where they can get a whole bunch back. They've found ways to create offense with all sorts of different personnel groupings through the years, and you just kind of like have enough confidence that they're going to be able to do it, and maybe the long-term play is to get draft picks back for Deebo Samuel. So where's Deebo going to land? I'll say the Jets. Jets are going to go all in for him there.
I like the New Orleans idea now that I brought it up.
Nice one.
This kind of move the Saints would make,
Yeah. Like, you're looking at the cap space thing, and it's like, who makes the most sense? You look at no, it's the team that doesn't seem to make the most sense on paper.
To hell with the future, the Saints right now.
Future Jet or future Saint, Deebo Samuel. The Titans discussion is an interesting one because we did have an email, right? Am I jumping around here? Can I do that?
I mean, you can do whatever you like. You're the host.
I do. I facilitate. Point guard.
Yeah.
Mom, point guard, whatever you want to call me. We do have a Titans-related question. We had a Deebo-related question, too, which was
who's
perfect.
that from? We'll cover that. I'll give him a shout-out just because we kind of talked about it. Phil.
That's Phil.
Phil was asking about Deebo from Scotland. Phil from Scotland.
I was about to say, is that Phil Sims? But it's not.
No, I don't think Phil Sims from Scotland.
I don't think so. Maybe he's moved to Scotland since.
It's possible.
It is possible.
Anyway.
Unlikely Phil Sims, but it's Phil from Scotland.
He asked about Deebo, A.J. Brown, Terry
Phil
McLaurin,
must know Gordon,
etc. He must know Gordon because he's from Scotland?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how it works, right? Is Scotland like Ireland? Everybody knows each other? Don't you guys? Or is that just Dublin?
It's not really anywhere. It's not that everyone knows everybody in Ireland. The sort of the quirk of Ireland is that you can basically like write a vague description of a guy on a letter and send it, and the post office will get it there. You know, like if you write your man from up the lane that's doing a master's in Trinity, send it out. It'll get there.
It'll get there.
Yeah, and Plus is really good. There's all these they come up every now and again in these sort of regional like meme factory type accounts. Like just a letter that somebody's thrown in, presumably to test them at this point. Right?
Yeah,
'cause there's no way people are doing this like that's how they think the best way of getting in touch with this person is. So presumably there are people that drop these things in to actually test and post, and they throw it in and it gets there. It's a pretty small place once you get out in the shticks. Anyway, what the hell were we talking about? Titans. Yes.
Titans email. You going to read it?
Yeah. This email is from David Frost. Hello, Sam and Steve. Appreciate the work you guys put into the show each week. I wanted to speak on behalf of Titans fans for the moment. There are picks that we'd be okay with hearing in mock drafts to the Titans at 26. Here are the demands, with GM John Robinson's recent draft history in mind. Number one, it's got to be offense. The Titans believe they're in a Super Bowl window with this team, a window that's shrinking. The team is saddled with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback and have preached the need to be great around him. Number two, a wide receiver is preferred. Cue the AFC arms race discussion. We saw what happened last year when the Titans had to depend on just A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Depth is needed. The top projected options are likely off the board at 26, but there are plenty of fringe first-round options that could be available. George Pickens, to me, is the perfect fit that nobody's talking about. John Robinson has shown the willingness to take a chance on special, even if it means accepting some injury history, Jeffrey Simmons, Caleb Farley. Pickens has also expressed a love for run blocking. It may be silly, but that's music to the ears of Mike Vrabel and John Robinson. Also, by the way, as an aside, they might be losing A.J. Brown. So it might be more necessary than ever. Number three, offensive line is another option. There's a section of Titans fans who will be disappointed by another high pick spent on the offensive line. It's not sexy, but remains a need nonetheless, with the core group either aging or entering a contract year. Zion Johnson, in particular, has a connection to the team, having played with Mike Vrabel's son, Tyler, on the Boston College offensive line.
Look at that connection.
Yeah. I realize I've highlighted two players who have not fallen to the Titans in any of your recent mocks, Sam. It's a frustrating spot to be in with so many teams picking in the 20s having similar needs. I can't will any player into existence for the Titans, but there should still be plenty of offensive options should they decide to stay at 26. Tyler Smith, in the latest mock draft, is as close as you've come so far to maximizing the pick. Curious to hear your thoughts. David
That's
Frost.
why you read this. You got a compliment out of it.
Is that a compliment? That's very backhanded if it is.
Well, no, because you already picked George Pickens.
That's the closest you've come to doing anything useful.
Yeah, but I think that was implying that's the closest anybody has come to maximizing it. I think everybody's screwing up the Titans pick, per Titans fans. I think the George Pickens one is a fascinating one. That's one of your guys in the draft here. We're giving him to Green Bay quite a bit. I think he's fine there with or without A.J. Brown, right? Because they don't have Julio Jones anymore.
Right.
They wanted to have Julio Jones. It didn't work out. Of course, you can make George Pickens and A.J. Brown work. It's definitely more of a two wide receiver system, and you have two really good outside receivers. I like the Pickens thought there. I also like the history that he brought to the table there, that John Robinson has taken Jeffrey Simmons and Caleb Farley and tried to hit first-round home runs, especially in the back half of the first round, where hit rate is really all over the place compared to picking in the top 10 or picking in the top 12 to 13. The hit rate's all over the place. Why not try to get a guy with top 10 caliber ability? And I think, Pickens probably resembles that remark.
Yeah, I think so. Pickens makes sense. I think wide receiver generally makes sense. My issue with the Titans has been more that, if there are picks that the fan base as a whole is happy with, and this seems to suggest that there are, it's more that I don't know that they appreciate their own negatives. It's not like there are teams that we've been given picks on some of these mock drafts. We're like, no, this genuinely isn't a need, right? Buffalo, where we gave them Linderbaum. Washington, when we gave them Evan Neal. There are picks we've made where you can I'm not even trying to argue that it's a need. I'm just, there's a way, and it's a best player available type of deal. At some point, you just pick for value. There are picks, I don't think any of those we've given Tennessee fit that
they have
category.
Robert Woods there too, by the way, but that still all works.
I don't think there's any pick that we've given Tennessee where it's that falls into that category of this is just value. There's no need here whatsoever. The point is they have some holes that Titans fans not necessarily acknowledging.
I mean, the perfect value plus need pick is probably Zion Johnson, right, at guard. And you went Tyler Smith, who's a tackle slash guard, right, potentially there. Because Jamarco Jones, who I did like coming out as a developmental prospect, hasn't developed. He is on the roster. He might be their starting left guard at the moment. Could be Derwin Gray. Could be anyone. But that does fill an actual starting spot there if it is Zion Johnson from Boston College. And I do like the Vrabel connection because Tyler is Zion's teammate. The other part of it, the Deebo Samuel thing, just to connect to this once again, doesn't that further the idea that you always just need to draft the best players at the most valuable positions? Draft, or not say, well, we already have Deebo Samuel, we're not going to look at wide receiver. We already have so-and-so, we're not going to look at this player. Because rosters really do turn over daily, and you just don't know. Like, maybe you just can't bank on having Deebo Samuel on your team. You can't bank on having Kyler Murray on your team, maybe if you're the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not saying keep drafting QBs necessarily, but I think that's the importance of not letting the current roster dictate your draft strategy, other than maybe path to playing time and resource distribution.
Well, what it does is ensure or enforce that you have to be planning your roster. You have to have at least a 1-year outlook. You have to have a 2-year outlook of what the team is going to be and where the turnover is going to be and where the money is going to be in a year's time, in 2 years' time. And, Ben Stockwell was pointing out with the Evan Neal thing, even though they have right now 2 starting offensive tackles, those guys are not necessarily there long-term contractually. Right. Like, they can get out of deals quickly enough, right? And there's a path to playing time for Evan Neal and et cetera. So even though, like, right now it doesn't look great, in a year's time it might look a hell of a lot better. So when you're – and this is, Dallas, right? Classic example of the opposite. Dallas just didn't seem to see any of the contracts that were coming up or the impacts that they were going to have coming. Like, they didn't have this 1-2 year outlook. It was like, oh, crap. They just got surprised by it. It's like, here's the bill. When you're, like, on it.
By which one? By Deebo's development?
No, but Dallas by, like, all of the contracts. That,
right, yeah.
It's not to put myself in the shoes of a billionaire again, right? But I would imagine if you're that stinking rich, you don't really think about what the bill's going to be at the end of, like, dinner. You go out, you get whatever you want. And then eventually somebody turns up with a bill, and you just read the number, you're like, right? But if you're a little bit less rich than the billionaire, right, there might be a sum, there might be a figure on that sheet of paper that is a bit jarring. You're like, oh, that was a lot more than I was expecting. That's actually going to bite deep. So it feels like, Jerry Jones, being as rich as he is, just cruises around, never has to think about the bill. But Jerry Jones, the GM, like, at some point somebody's going to show up with a bill, and now you have a salary cap to deal with.
It's a cap.
And when that's too big, you're like, oh, that caused some problems. I didn't see that coming. That's kind of what it felt like happened with Amari Cooper and these deals that came down the pipe. It's like they just didn't think about it until, oh, hang on, wait. Ooh, all of a sudden the salary cap's getting squeezed now. The bill's due, and I don't want to pay that.
Are you saying sometimes it's difficult to be Jerry Jones where 1 week you're at prime 47,
not thinking about the bill.
Tabs open. Tabs open. End of the night, it's closed. Doesn't really matter what it is at prime. And then a couple weeks later, free agency opens. Hey, you got a cap. You got a cap to worry about. It's not this open tab at prime.
Well, it's like, as a GM, Jerry Jones suddenly has to live in the world of other humans where they have to budget.
Budgeting.
Yeah. Like, he doesn't have to think about that.
Yeah.
Man doesn't have to budget for anything. Oh, the Jerry bus is breaking down. Just buy a new one. Oh, the yacht needs refurbishing. Pfft, get a new one. Whatever. Here's the credit card. Just get it done.
Buy Twitter.
Yeah.
Sometimes
exactly.
Buy Twitter.
Elon.
I want to edit my tweets.
Twitter's not doing. I'm just gonna buy it and fix it myself. All of a sudden, when you're dealing with the salary cap, you have to live in the world of normal people, where you actually have to think about the bills coming down the line and move money around, or sell things, or make more money, or whatever, because otherwise you can't afford to pay it. And the best teams in the NFL have that outlook. They understand the moves that are coming down the line ahead of time, so that they're not reacting to these things as if they were a shock, and consequently they're managing their rosters better. That's what you have to do. So I don't think you necessarily have to see, we're going to have to replace, A.J. Brown because we're not going to pay him that kind of money. Or we're going to have to replace Terry McLaurin. We're going to get ahead of that and bring in contingency. But you at least have to appreciate, okay, he's looking amazing right now. So in a year's time, we're going to have to pay him the bag. And that's going to, eat $25, $30 million into our salary cap. What does that affect? And plan this out. Like a year ago, this should have been in the consciousness of every one of these teams, right? If these guys have another good year, like we're on the hook for this money, or we have to decide they're not worth this money and move on from them. But these are the plans that have to be happening. If they didn't, that's just negligent management, right?
So that's why I think receiver and secondary in general are two positions that we've identified as extremely valuable. They're positions where you need multiple starters, and they're positions where you just never want to be weak because they're valuable, right? So it's one of those things where if you continue to draft good receivers or corners, you could find a way to make it work. Like there's a path to the field for those guys. And then it also brings insurance for when your top guy, say the Titans, A.J. Brown, like if the Titans had drafted a first-round receiver last year, I was fine with the Farley pick, but if they had drafted a first-round receiver last year, you would have found a way to put him on the field with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. And then if A.J. Brown decided he wanted to get traded, hopefully you have a replacement for him as well, right? It's like twofold. I think it's good short-term and long-term, and it's good strategically and tactically. Tactically on the field, strategically as far as team building goes. Not to the negligence of places like tackle, where you just have one starter and you have to make sure you have your starter. But that's why I do like the idea of bulk drafting receivers, corners, in those positions where you can use a lot of them, and then if one of them wants to leave, you're not going to be completely screwed at the position as well. Does that answer our Titans question then? That was good. It was a good well thought out question. I'll remember that next time I do a Titans mock draft. Some of those, some of that insights from from David Frost there.
Yeah.
What else do we have here as far as emails go?
So let's do this one. Somebody was asking, Matt, said we needed Brad's input here. I don't think we do, although I have talked to him. I was wondering, given David Ojabo's Achilles injury, could there be a hidden benefit for a team who grabbed him at the end of the first round? Given the injury risk factor, consensus is that he'll slide, but could a savvy team take advantage of this? My first thought is simply that over 5 years, he has more time to recover, and a team has a better opportunity to assess his NFL potential when healthy. This is using the fifth-year option that you get from the first rounders. Second, and this bit requires more knowledge than I have, I believe one of the factors behind the fifth-year option calculation is playing time over the first 3 years. If he's redshirted for a year and allowed to fully heal, would that nuke his playing time to the extent that his fifth-year contract could be amazing value? So more than just taking advantage of other teams' conservatism, because a talented player won't be an immediate contributor, is there potentially a future financial benefit to derive from selecting an injured player with a high ceiling in round one?
He could be limited snap-wise just because he's not good against the run, too.
Yeah.
He could just be a 500-snap guy as it is, even when healthy.
And just raw and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I haven't talked to Brad specifically about this, but I was talking to him a little bit about the fifth-year option stuff and essentially speculating that it feels kind of worthless at the moment because remember a few years ago it was like, oh, you grab a quarterback with the fifth-year option at the bottom of the first round because if he's great, you get the extra year.
If he's great. Yes.
Right. But the problem is, if he's great, you're not using the fifth-year option because you're giving him the contract before then anyway, right? Like Josh Allen. Josh Allen got the contract. All these quarterbacks, if you're sure, if you believe, you're giving them the $40 million deal way before that fifth-year option is anywhere near relevant, right? And then,
but there's some leverage.
If they're a disaster, you're not giving them anything, right? It's not a factor. The only ones that it's relevant to at all are guys where you're unsure, and it's a Baker Mayfield thing. And what that's doing more and more is like torpedoing the draft or the trade value of those guys. So the Browns pick up Baker Mayfield's fifth-year option because they're not 100% sure if he's the guy, and now they can't get rid of him because nobody wants to pay the fifth-year option for him. They don't want to pay that money. The Jets did get rid of him, get rid of Sam Darnold, and the fifth-year option is saddled Carolina. Like, they're screwed. So really the only team that's applicable to is where you reach complete stalemate or impasse, like Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
So that's the one, right, where we're sure he's good, but for some reason we can't come to an arrangement on a contract, so we just play the fifth-year option because that's what we got here.
But if it buys you another year, that is valuable.
Well,
Because on the other ends, you're basically saying there's no upside.
So
there's some downside if you're stuck with a Darnold.
I don't think it's valuable in terms of you using it, but where it is valuable, and this was the point that Brad was making to me, is it's negotiation leverage, right?
Right.
It's the ability to keep him around for one more year at this amount of money.
That's what I was saying.
You were saying
Brad
it's
said it.
valuable to use it.
No, but
you
the
never
first
wanna
thing I said
use it.
when I was trying to talk over you, interrupting as I always do,
Yeah.
I said leverage.
No, that's true.
I
And then
yelled leverage out.
Yeah, then you
leverage.
made a different point.
I don't know leverage. I'm a high.
The
high
leverage
pad
one
guy.
is the right point. It's like it gives you the ability to make more sense in the contract negotiations, which is what.
Sure.
So it's becoming this tool now to basically get the contract done, as opposed to any threat of actually using it as anything useful. So teams trading into the first round for a quarterback, all they're trading for is the potential leverage that they can actually negotiate a deal a little bit easier if that guy's good, as opposed to any threat that they might get. You're not, we used to think of it as like you get one more year of like pretty cheap quarterback play if you hit on that guy.
Yeah.
But you're not, because you're never be playing that out, except the Ravens for some reason, because they can't get a deal done with Lamar. But that's not what anybody is trading for anymore. What they're trading for, if they're looking for that, is the leverage of that extra year in guaranteed terms, so that if they hit, they can actually get the quarterback to negotiate a new contract.
Should more teams be playing it like the Ravens? Or is that going to become riskier because you have guys
I don't
like
think they're
Kyler
trying
Murray
to.
heading into year 4 who are just like, forget it, I'm not playing it
I
anymore.
don't think the Ravens are trying to play it that way. I think they would sign him tomorrow if they could get a deal done. They're not exploiting that. But so when you then start looking at other players or other positions, the Ajabo thing is interesting, because if we take this premise that he sits out a year because of the Achilles, he plays from then on, he's really good, right? I don't think you offset the value lost by losing essentially a year of his cheap deal completely, right? You get zero value year one because he didn't play, and yet you still paid him. I don't think that gets offset by the fifth-year option in almost any capacity. Like playing time, there's the reduction of playing time that factors into that number involved in the fifth-year option is not going to offset the first year that you lost from him not playing. And it also factors in things like, Pro Bowls and All-Pros. Like if he's really good and he makes a Pro Bowl year 2 or 3, that's completely blown out of the water.
Yeah.
So the bottom line, I think, is no. Like it's not the real value is losing that year, which is what you're paying for. I don't think you're necessarily offsetting that by getting him for one more year, because you're paying him quite a lot of money in that 1 year.
Yeah, I think I lost my train of thought on that.
But it's the leverage thing, right? Like That's where you come. It's like if he is really good, you do have him under contract for one extra year, which potentially allows you to negotiate the second contract easier than if you only have him for essentially, you would have him zero play from year 1. He would presumably be good year 2, and then you only have 2 years left to get him under contract again.
See, I don't think I'm back and forth on that, because in isolation, I think you're right. But
That's all I need to hear.
I think it's when you combine it with other things, right? We always talk about diversifying your portfolio, diversifying your team building effort, and diversifying your draft picks. I think it's okay to try to hit home runs on certain draft picks. It's okay to this is why I keep saying when teams have 2 or 3 draft picks, take the quote-unquote high upside player, however you define that, right? Take the safe player, however you define that. I think having a mix makes sense. And Ojabo would be the quote-unquote high upside player because A, he's raw, B, he's injured. And if you understanding that your stocks are going to hit at different times, so that your players are going to hit at different times, right? Like Rashawn Gary didn't figure it out until end of year 2 and into year 3. If you have other ways of mitigating that, which the Packers did, right? They invested in the Za'Darius and Preston Smith as edge defenders, and then they got value out of those guys, and then Rashawn Gary hit at a time when those guys were on their way out the door, right? So you can balance those things off a little bit, but in isolation, your point is probably true there. The other thing about your point is if players hit late, you're missing on some value. That concept has me rethinking the age stuff, right? Because we talk a lot about draft prospect age and like, this guy's 20. He's going to get better. But we've seen a lot of 20-year-olds, the Tim Settle argument. Tim Settle took 4 years to become good, then he was gone in Washington. The Seattle get these great athletes strategy where by the time they were good, it's year 4 or 5, they're gone. Do you actually lose value if you just get these developmental players that don't? It takes them 3 years to get good.
Yeah,
right? Is age overrated in the draft process?
It is, but not. So the way I think the only value to age, I think, is you need to have seen it already. Like age, I think, is important in terms of like when did a guy become good? Because generally speaking, really good players don't need the advantage of being older to be good, right? So if a guy was dominant at 19, that's important because versus a guy that was dominant only in his senior season when he was 23, right? Because those 4 years.
So that's where, if you're using age paired with production.
Yes.
Right? If you're saying for this age, this is good production,
right.
That is a good way to use age.
Correct.
What I'm saying is just saying this guy's young, he'll get better. This guy's old, he won't get better.
Yes.
And if you're using that in isolation, I think you're overrating age.
Right.
Because if you're still really, Calvin Ridley was like, we were joking, he's 30 years old. He was 23 as a rookie. He was more than good enough at 23 that you got plenty of value out of Calvin Ridley.
Age should not be used as a reason that a guy will be better in the NFL. In terms of like, this guy is not a great player now, but he's only 19, therefore he'll be amazing. You know, the age should only be used as a differentiator between guys that were already good. This guy was good, but he was good when he was 19, as opposed to this guy who was only good when he hit 22, 23.
Right.
Because the second guy, you don't know if he was only good because he hit 22, 23, right? Because he got physically older and more developed and experienced, and that's what made him good, versus the first guy that was just amazing right out of the box, and that's an important thing. You shouldn't be taking a guy who hasn't ever been good and saying, yeah, but he's got all the physical tools and he's only 20.
Yeah, therefore he'll be better.
Right.
There's very, very much risk associated with that.
Yes.
Do we have any other emails to discuss here?
We do.
I scrolled down. Maybe a Bobby Wagner interview. You never know.
Yeah, it's probably
still in our documentation. We're ready for the Bobby Wagner interview.
We're ready. It might never happen, but we're there for it. So Brian Wetzel emailed in with a bunch of questions, only one of which I'm going to read. We already have all the metrics, measurables, and tape from college and the underwear Olympics. We've got all the drills and numbers from pro days, or not. I'll be curious to know what tests, drills, or questions do I have to read y'all?
Yeah. You have to read it.
Would y'all have them do differently?
Is this from Scotland again?
I doubt it. Seeing how the data points have mapped to success or not in the NFL, what drill would you have players do that they currently don't? Or what data point would you want to have that they don't give us as an additional metric to help score things better? Long-time listener, keep up the good work.
Good question. I don't know if there's anything different that I would add. I think we're closing in on the point where we'll have all of the game level information that we need, right? So whether it's player tracking information. So like if we didn't have player tracking information on players, I would make them run routes, receivers.
Well, I would
want to see that.
Yeah, the player tracking is going to take you to where I would want to go.
Right.
What I've always wanted is I want to see them run in pads.
Yeah.
And I want to see them run in what they're going to be wearing on game day.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise everyone would just show up with Michael Bennett's shoulder pads, the children's ones that he used to wear.
Yeah.
They were like this big and would just sit there. Whatever the lightest, smallest thing is, that's what I'll be running my 40 in. But whatever you wore, your final game, of the regular season, that's where you're running your 40 in. Because there's a difference, right? There's a difference. Wearing that crap slows you down. Some people handle that better than others. And there's definitely a difference in game speed versus time speed for some players. And I've always wondered how much of that is the equipment you have to wear. I'm sure, obviously some of it is technique and the ability to, learn how to start in the 40 and all those kinds of things. But I bet you there's a bunch of players that just don't run as fast once they have shoulder pads, thigh pads, a helmet on, the whole shebang. It's awkward. It's not as natural. And I bet some players handle that better than others. I've always wanted to see what impact that has. But you don't need to if the player tracking data is going to get you to that point anyway. So there's no point in doing it now.
Apparently I've been spammed here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Seems legit.
Cool. It's not really relevant to this question, but
I'm just hoping we don't get infected over here.
okay.
Just hoping we don't get infected. Twitter DM asking for help. Tried to oblige. Spam.
Okay.
So
You
what
wanna
other?
maybe get your head in the game and,
I don't know if there's much I would add to the workout stuff because again, I do think we'll have the game stuff. I think you're right on the game speed thing. Is there something you can do? Because you talked about VHS, vision head start for safeties. At the combine, it's really controlled, right? Like, go that way.
Yeah.
Go that way. Let me see you flip your hips. Is there something you can do to learn reaction time for, say, a safety or a linebacker?
Yes.
That might be the other thing I would look at, right? I think there are some positions in football which dictate the action. What am I looking at? So there's reactionary positions and proactive positions, essentially, right? A corner is reactive. A linebacker, a safety is reactive. An offensive lineman in pass protection is reactive. I would say, can you do something at the skill sets that are reactive to test those types of things?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you could do a lot with when we get VR up and running in a serious way. I think both offensive side and defensive side could do a lot in terms of you almost create like a sort of Wonderlic test, but for on-field plays in football, right?
Yeah.
It's like here you're going to see 10 basic passing concepts, and you're going to play the same defense every play, right? You're playing cover 3. You're the single high free safety. You're going to see 10 separate passing concepts come your way, and you've got to figure out where the ball's going.
Yeah.
Right? And you just have to do that on the fly, and you're going to see the difference between a Kyle Hamilton with his inbuilt, 3 yards in his
So
head.
they're sitting there with the
VHS.
3D headset.
Yeah, you're playing single high free safety. You're seeing 10 standard pass concepts come your way, and you got to read and fly to the ball.
Yeah.
You're going to see the difference between a guy like him and a guy who has no idea what he's doing there, just trying to react. Similarly, quarterbacks, right? That's like the thing that people keep trying to get at with the Wonderlic, with the draw it up on the chalkboard crap, with the you're trying to ascertain, can you do this stuff on the fly and make split-second adjustments and react, right? So you give him maybe the same passing play, but you're going to see 5 different coverages or whatever at random. Make the snap adjustment, put the ball where it needs to go, done. How quickly can you do that? That's going to be so different for Mac Jones versus Kenny Pickett. The speed difference between those two guys in that scenario is going to be massive.
So here's where my mind was going as you're describing that, right? Because agents have taught players how to master everything that they need to go through, right? So if you had this VR, you're going to be single high free safety. At what point do the agents, they're just training their guys, right? Like, okay, here are the concepts you're going to see.
Like in an ideal world, everyone would get the same 5 plays or the same 5 reps. But the first time, some dude's 6th round pick goes in, and immediately he's like, well, "What were the plays?" Because we're going to tell this dude over here so he doesn't suck. You're the guinea pig for my actual real number 1 client to dominate.
Now, as I was saying that, though, it's like, okay, but that's just, why don't teams do that? Why don't they just practice football that way? So I have thought of this through the combine training and everything. Combine training has become so good, right, at maximizing footwork on your starts and how to run the agility drills and how to maximize your bench press and all these various things. I'm wondering if teams have things to glean from combine trainers, right? Are there ways to teach football, even though they're training for workouts is completely different from training for practicing football. Is there a correlation with how, there are tangible results with getting guys better at combine drills?
Yeah.
Are there things to glean from how they train for those particular drills with also teaching football? When you pull, again, I know offensive line coaches have certain technique, like working with your pulling guard or whatever it might be, but would you be better off actually with a speed coach teaching your pulling guard how to maximize his footwork and all that stuff? You know what I'm saying? I think there might be, this is getting off a little bit here, the subject, but maybe there's some things you could steal from the way they train for the combine and applying it to football. Which would be interesting.
Possibly. I mean, I think
because if we try to get to football stuff that we're going to be testing, someone's going to be mastering how to how to test well in that particular thing.
Obviously, that whole idea, like the finer details need to be worked out. But I do think that VR opens up a bunch of possibilities that teams haven't been able to get to until then on a sort of standardized level. Like teams do this. That's the whole point in like in-home workouts, in-house workouts. When teams bring in a quarterback or whatever to work him out, that's what they're trying to get to, right? They're trying to get him on the field and run through a bunch of these scenarios and figure out if he can do this stuff on the fly. And you can only do that 30 times in a season. You got 30 of those in-person workouts in your facility. In theory, if every team could get like a baseline on like a VR thing of what every safety, every corner, every quarterback, every receiver, all these guys can do in those scenarios, I think that's massively valuable. Like that's
the thing.
That's basically what the original purpose of the Wonderlic is supposed to be, right? It's like how smart is this guy? But what you're really asking is, can he read football and react to it?
Was just talking to we talked about some people look at the Wonderlic like in reverse, right? At some positions you don't want it to be too high because it is a reactionary position. I heard that again today.
A terrible idea.
Was talking to a name dropping without the name. Talking to a former GM today, the one who yelled at me.
Did you bring up the one obvious counter to that whole argument?
No, his was more on the. I think it was on some of the not IQ tests, but some of like the personality tests and stuff like that, where there's different correlations for different positions for what you're looking for from a personality test.
I refuse to believe that there's ever scenario where being dumber is useful. I'm not buying that. I cannot. No, I'm not having it.
He said specifically, but he said something. There's some test you want lower at certain positions.
I refuse to believe that there is a scenario where being stupider is more useful than being smart. I'm not having it. It's not true. If there's a correlation there, it's being forced by something else. It's a byproduct.
But with the Wonderlic, it's not really determining if you're smart or not smart.
I mean, sometimes
it's how well you take the test.
Kind of depends what your number is.
It's how well you take the test.
I'm just saying
you're just taking that data point and projecting it to on-field performance.
I'm just saying if you got a 4, you're not smart.
All I'm saying is I'm all for uniform testing, numbers, whatever it is. So that's why I like the combine, because we've had it for years, and like the 40 is the 40. And what you do with it is on you. Right? And that's where I think it's valuable, right? So the VR thing's great. I want to see consistent grit tests. I want to see grit tests. Yeah.
Oh, the other one.
I want prospects going head-to-head grit test.
Going back to our discussion with Joe Thomas, they need to measure arm length the right way.
Well, sure.
So at the moment, arm length is like out like this. It's from your shoulder blade up here to the tip of your fingers.
Yeah.
Useless to you because there's
you're
no
not blocking
scenario.
With fingertips.
Right. For offensive linemen in particular, like Joe Thomas had this idea where you would put like a plank or a plate or something on their chest, and you measure the extension that you can get out to the palm of your hand, because that's what's making contact with the opposing defender. Like that's the important measurement. How far from your chest plate, can you get out to the palm of your hand? That's length from an offensive lineman's point of view. That's the important number. So that one. That's what I want to see.
Better arm length?
Yeah. Correct arm length.
Correct arm length.
Functional arm length.
Functional arm length. Just if you throw functional on anything.
Right. Functional/practical arm length.
Functional speed. Functional training. Functional grit test. The grit test, for those who don't know, is a staring contest.
Is that more or less gritty than Sirianni's mini hoops thing?
What does he do?
He gets people to play a game of like mini hoops basketball
to just see competitiveness.
Yeah.
That is why they like the grit test. They want to see competitiveness, and the personality people like to see the reaction to that. I've heard some interesting takeaways on that, and how people. It's tough to balance anecdotal evidence versus hard evidence. But the anecdotal evidence is like, man, this dude was like just the perfect reaction after the grit test, and he turned out to be a great player. Whereas this other person was like a sociopath and worried and all that stuff, and things didn't turn out well for him. But any hard data point that you can then project might have some value, including the grit test.
Yeah.
As long as you capture it the same way. Is there a grit test expert in the room? Is there just one guy who's like your best staring contest guy? Is it your best scout?
We want the guy with like a glass eye, right? Who just never has to blink.
Jeez. You want the guy with the glass eye for the grit test.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's gritty is the PFF draft guide.
Gritty, huh?
Yeah, it's really gritty.
Okay.
It's over 500 pages of grit, and you get 50% off using Draft50. That's the promo code for 50% off. PFF Elite Annual, 365 days of access, all of our grades and stats and unlocked mock draft simulator, all that great stuff is 50% off, maybe only through the draft. So get on it now. Draft50 is the promo code, 50% off PFF Elite Annual subscription. And go check out Hutch, either here on the YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, 1,000 people got spammed here.
I didn't get spammed.
Eric McLean from ESPN. Former Clemson football captain.
You're not supposed to click on links.
Any link?
No links.
This seemed legit.
That's how they get you.
No, I know that. I mean, the Nigerian prince thing. I mean, that sounded legit.
The first time somebody got that email, it's like, wow, how lucky am I? And then, bankrupt.
This was, hey, can you do me a favor?
Immediately.
So here's the interesting thing. He has previously asked for a favor in these DMs. So that's what made it sound real here with Eric in particular. So.
Okay.
Anyway.
You should probably pay more attention to the podcast and not,
getting
DMing
spammed.
people. Yeah.
Well, this happened before the podcast. Now I'm just getting these updates that like, hey, stay away from that.
Okay.
Now, luckily, I only went to the website and I didn't go further. But hopefully we don't get infected here.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, the show's over. We're done.
Yeah.
It's over. So tomorrow we've got the player comp show. We had a lot of fun with Nate Tice from The Athletic, so be sure to tune into that. All of mine, Sam's, and Nate's player comps for a whole bunch of players. Most players we got comps for.
Yeah.
And it was a great discussion.
And some weird ones.
Really weird ones.
I love
Back to the 60s for
Nate's style of comps.
Yes.
I like that much better than the standard, like he reminds me of this amalgamation of all pros.
Right. It's not all going to be all pros. There could be some third-string running backs on there, too. And that's what's awesome. So go check that out wherever you're listening to us right now. And then next week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll have all of our preview shows leading up, and then we'll be hopefully with you right after the draft. Directly after the draft is the plan to recap round one. Late Thursday, early Friday morning. So keep tabs on all that stuff. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.